Disclaimer. Please forgive me now for there may be mispronunciations in this video. The Enfield Poltergeist is thought to be the best example ever of a real poltergeist activity, and was the most fascinating case of paranormal investigations in British history, but some have their doubts and consider it to be a hoax. It started on August 30th, 1977, at a semi-detached council house at 284 Green Street, in North London suburb of Enfield. The family consisted of a single mother, Peggy Hodgson, and her children. There was Margaret, who was 12, Janet, who was 11, Johnny, who was 10, and Billy, who was 7. The children were in bed when Peggy heard a commotion coming from their rooms upstairs. She told the children to be quiet and go to sleep, but Margaret, the oldest, said the beds were wobbling. Though the activity stopped for the night, it continued the next evening. Janet and her younger brother, Johnny, were in their bedroom when Peggy heard a loud rattling sound. Thinking it was the kids, she burst in to tell them to pack it in, when a chest of drawers shot across the room. Peggy tried moving the piece of furniture back into place, but was unable to. The family managed to escape the room and sleep elsewhere. That's when the knocking began. It was in the walls and ceiling, and loud sounds of something rapping or pounding came from inside. Since the activity increased, Peggy enlisted the help of a neighbor. Her neighbor, a man, went inside Peggy's home in search of the source of the activity, but left terrified by what he saw, heard, and felt. By now, their furniture moved and levitated, and small things like marbles and Legos flew through the air. But worst of all, it became apparent that Janet, 11, was the focus of the increasing violent activity. Janet would not only be thrown but levitated from her bed and began to go into a trance, speaking with a gruff man's voice. The man's voice claimed to be the ghost of Bill Watkins. Janet spoke with the man's voice and said, "Just before I died, I went blind, and then I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep, and I died in the chair in the corner downstairs." The scary fact is, the claim that Watkins died in the house was verified by Watkins' son, who said his father died in just the manner that the voice described. The police would be called, and they too witnessed activity. Officer WPC Carolyn Heaps watched as a large chair moved 4 feet across the room. Heaps checked the chair for wires or anything that could cause the movement, but found nothing. The police left just as baffled as everyone else. Peggy Hodgson sought for even more help and contacted the media. BBC sent reporters to the house, and they experienced unexplained problems with their tape recorders. The tapes would jam and the internal metal parts bent. The word of the Enfield Poltergeist would reach paranormal investigators. The case would take a 14-month investigation that was led by psychic investigator Maurice Gross and Society for Psychical Research investigator Guy Lyon Playfair, who was a poltergeist expert. He was convinced the activity was real. According to Playfair, during the first few months, the paranormal floodgates opened. The famous Ed and Lorraine Warren also visited the house in Enfield, but they didn't do anything significant like in the Conjuring 2 movie suggests. They briefly investigated the case in summer of 1978 and were just 2 of many investigators. From what Playfair had said, the Warrens showed up uninvited and only stayed for a day. He also said that Ed Warren told him he could make a lot of money off this case. There was photographic imagery, demonic sound tape recordings, and a great amount of witness statements claiming the paranormal activity. But the most documented happenings was the levitation and moving objects. Morris had set up a special camera that enabled him to retake remote photo sequences, and in one of them, Janet in a red nightdress was supposedly lifted from her bed and thrown across the room. One of the skeptics was magician Milbourne Christopher. His opinion was the activity was the work of Janet and possibly others. Later on, speech therapists would explain the tactic of her voice changing, saying that gravely sounds come from the false vocal cords at the back of the neck. They said these cords are often used by actors who wanted to put on a throaty voice, but producing the sound for more than a few minutes can result in a sore throat. Janet apparently kept it up for hours, And then there was the apparent test that Maurice Grosse did. By taping Janet's mouth or having her mouth full of water, and the voice would still speak. Grosse passed away in 2006, but before his passing he said, "It was absolutely terrifying to hear a girl speak in an old man's gruff voice." A priest would arrive at the house, and by 1978 the activity nearly stopped, but never completely ceased. However, there is another story claiming it did cease, that a mysterious Dutch medium came over. He went up to the bedroom on his own, and after a quarter of an hour or so, he came down and said, "It's gone," and sure enough, that was the end of it. To conclude, Janet did admit to investigators that in the last years, about 2% of events had been hoaxed by her and her sister, but not all of it was a hoax. Janet freely admitted to occasionally hoaxing, as did the two main investigators. Janet was placed in the Maudsley Hospital for psychiatric evaluation in July 1978 and was tested thoroughly for 2 months and was said to be perfectly healthy and normal. In the time Janet was away, the activity died down completely. Once she returned, she always felt there was something there right up until her mom Peggy died. After Peggy Hodgson's death, a family moved into the house. They claimed they never experienced the things the Hodgsons did, but they did get an unnerving feeling, like they were being watched. That family moved out shortly after. What do you think of the Enfield Poltergeist? I would like to apologize if this video comes out somewhat different than the others. I had to move all my programs to another PC and were updated to their newer versions, so I was still learning about the programs. Hopefully it turns out good. Did you like this video? Want to support this channel and get early access? Feel free to check out my Patreon page where I create content on cryptids, hauntings, alien abductions, serial killers, and much more. Can you support me there? Like, comment, and subscribe here.